So if you're one of the many Vancouverites or people that are thinking of moving to Vancouver that are kind of caught between living in a condo and living in a house, a condo probably just being too small and a house being perhaps too big, but more than likely just too expensive, what options do you have? There's something that we've been calling the missing middle. The solution to the missing middle is the townhouse. And the townhouse is a fantastic option for people that are kind of caught between the condo and the house. And that's what this video is all about. It's about helping you understand what they are, what to look for, where to find them. We're getting into it right here. With defining what a townhouse is, we're going to get into the pros and the cons of townhouses. We're going to talk about what areas of Vancouver and of the Vancouver suburbs, Metro Vancouver, can you find townhouses. And then I'm also going to give you some help in what to look out for when you're buying a townhouse. And finally, we're going to get into some major tips. So you're going to want to stay tuned for those at the end. So how do you define a townhouse? I really think in many markets, the definition of a townhouse it varies. In Vancouver, honestly, I think you'd talk to 5 different real estate agents and they'd probably give you 5 different answers. In my mind, a townhouse has its own front door, number 1. Number 2, that front door faces the street. So you're not off street level, you're directly onto the street. Number 3, it's usually 3 levels. In the city of Vancouver, it's almost always 3 levels, but occasionally it's 2 levels and less frequently it's 1 level. And to be honest, I'm hesitant to call a 1-level property a townhouse. To me, a townhouse has stairs in it. So those 3 things: its own front door, street facing, street level, and usually 3 levels. That's what makes a townhouse. And in Metro Vancouver, there's really 2 distinct types of townhouses, and they're pretty different. So you really want to be careful when you're checking out townhouses that you know the differences between these and what it means for you. So really, type 1 is a type that's a townhouse that's attached to a bigger strata. And why that's important is because you're going to see much higher maintenance fees. There's much more building expense to cover, and the townhouses are typically the largest unit. The townhouse is probably about 1,200 square feet. And, the maintenance fees, if the units are 500, 600, 700 square feet, aren't that substantial or not that overwhelming. But once you get to 1,200 square feet or 1,500 square feet, maintenance fees can be kind of debilitating, like very large bills. Number 2 is, in that situation, you would also have typically more amenities. I mean, you're part of this larger strata building, so there might be a concierge. There could be a swimming pool, there could be a gym, maybe some sort of garden area, central courtyard type thing. So usually you're getting some more amenities for that. And then number 3, the other big difference is that your parking is almost always going to be in an underground parkade, and it's going to be an open stall. So you don't have a garage in this circumstance. So the second type of townhouse is the standalone townhouse development. And so rather than a development in the first type that might have 300 units or 200 units, this is typically a smaller townhouse development, but that might be as few as 10, could be 20, could be 50, somewhere around that number. This standalone townhouse development will typically have much lower strata fees because there are no common hallways, there's maybe no underground parkade, there's no amenities typically, so there's not a lot to really pay for. And then, like, insurance of the building is much cheaper. Strata fees are usually, they could be around $150 rather than potentially $1,500 in the first type. And number 3, the other big difference is this is the type where you'll frequently see a garage. So a garage that's attached to the unit. It's not in every circumstance, but this is where you will see it much more commonly. So now let's get into the pros and the cons of townhouses. Number 1, it's really the only option that you're going to have for 3 bedrooms if you're not buying a house, especially in the city of Vancouver. Even still in some of the very close suburbs, it's really only once you get into the outer suburbs that a 3-bedroom condo might become more common, but they're incredibly rare in the city of Vancouver. So typically, families are going to be looking for 3 bedrooms. You have you and your spouse, and then you have 1 kid maybe, but you'd like a guest room, or you'd like an office, or you have 2 kids or 3. Obviously, you need 3 or more bedrooms. And so condos just haven't been built for that purpose, unfortunately. And it's townhouses that fill this gap. And so the real pro is that they're essentially family size. Number 2, they're like a house. So you have things like your own front door onto the street, the potential to have a garage, the potential to have more outdoor space than you would typically with a condo, like a yard, a fenced-in yard. So if you have kids, you'd like to see them play on the grassy front lawn, or have your dog just run outside and do its business instead of having to go, from the 20th floor down the elevator, or just bringing your groceries in, right, off the street. Third pro is at a central location. So I talked in my video about houses, I was talking how they're typically not in the best location because they're off the central areas. And where we've been building higher density is around the busiest intersections, the commercial centers, and then that's where the highest density is. And then they sort of do a pyramid away from that, right? So the towers are at the heart of that section, and then you sort of get like shorter towers down to townhouses and half duplexes, and then houses in the more outlying areas. So the townhouses are not quite at the heart of the center, but they're very close to it. So a much more central location typically than a house. And number 4 is low maintenance. So it's a type of home that you can walk away, go away for the weekend, go on a trip, and you don't really need to think about it. You don't have to worry if it snowed. You don't have to worry about mowing the lawns or your neighbor who's going to complain if you're not taking care of the house. You just don't have to do it because you're paying those maintenance fees for somebody else to worry about all that. So I find a lot of young families are viewing townhouses much more favorably than they view a house. Part of that reason is actually the lifestyle allows, is more in keeping with what people want. They want experiences, right? They don't want a thing that they have to take care of. They just want a place where they can live, where hopefully there's a good investment, but they don't want to be taking care of it. And they're getting something really nice as well. And so typically the townhouses are newer. And if you're spending, let's call it $1.5 million on a townhouse versus $2 million on a house in the same neighborhood, the townhouse is going to be far nicer than that much more expensive house. What you're paying for with the house is the land. It's going to be on a much bigger piece of land, but you're not getting much in terms of comfort or high quality finishings. That's what you're paying for in the townhouse. And so I find that many people are attracted to the quality of the finishings, as well as just that low maintenance factor. And if you are thinking of finding a nice family neighborhood, well, hey, I can help you with that. I am a real estate agent. I'm not a professional YouTuber. Big surprise there, but I've helped hundreds of families move to the city of Vancouver, and I can help you too. So if you're thinking of moving, do reach out. My contact information is right there on the screen. Reach out anytime, and we can get that ball rolling. Now let's get back to the video. All right. So there's lots to love about the townhouse, and they are clearly growing in popularity, and more of them are being built. But they do have cons. And number 1 con, especially in the city of Vancouver, but in Metro Vancouver in comparison to most of North America, is the cost. They are not cheap. And I'm going to run through some numbers in some areas, typical parts of the city that you're going to find them, and give you an idea of what they cost in June of 2023. In East Vancouver, the typical townhouse will be $1,108,900. In the west side of Vancouver, it's $1,497,000. In Richmond, it's $1,185,500. Coquitlam, it's $1,074,600. Port Moody is $1,033,100. Surrey is $871,300. And New Westminster is $945,100. All of the areas that I just mentioned are contiguous. You don't have to cross a bridge except for Surrey. So you notice that the cheapest area for townhouses that I mentioned is the one that you have to cross a bridge for. And so that's important to note. New Westminster is just on the other side, but once you cross the bridge, essentially, what is that? About $75,000 that you're saving by crossing the bridge into Surrey. So there are options. You don't have to buy a townhouse on the west side of Vancouver where it's a $1.5 million. It's almost half the price if you go all the way out to Surrey, but certainly 50% less if you're looking at areas like Port Moody or Coquitlam. So you definitely have options. The second con, aside from the price, is that you have less freedom. But what I mean by that is that you have less freedom than if you lived in a house, because what you're in is a strata and you have to follow the rules of the strata. You're going to have very close proximity to your neighbors, which can be a pro. I mean, what some people love about living in a townhouse complex is actually the community that they're surrounded with. But the con is that you're not going to get away from them, that there's people watching what you're doing. And if you're breaking some of the rules, some of the bylaws of the strata, you might get fined for that. And not everybody loves that. And so, that's one of the cons of living in a townhouse development. And the third con are the fees. So unlike a house where you just have to pay for things as it comes up, with a townhouse in a strata, there is a monthly maintenance fee. And as we mentioned as one of the pros, the low maintenance, well, you're paying somebody else to take care of that. So there is a cost for that every single month. You will be paying a property management company to manage the property. But on top of that, there's just regular things that need to be done, like the gardening, the snow removal, somebody to come and fix the elevator when it's down, or double check that the roof is in good repair. So there's lots of sort of overhead costs that go into a strata, their insurance, and any electricity or heat that has to be done in the common areas as well. There's that sort of regular maintenance that's required, but then there's also the potential for special assessments. And to be honest, that's not a four-letter word, but if it was a four-letter word, it would be a bad word in Vancouver. Nobody likes to hear anything about a special assessment. It is scary. And I know, I myself was in a strata where I had a $20,000 special assessment at one point. To be honest, that felt like I dodged a bullet, because some of these special assessments could be hundreds of thousands of dollars for very large things. They can also just be relatively small amounts, like just adding a little bit of money into the budget because there was a bit of a shortfall. So, it could be as small as $100 a unit or something like that. But what a special assessment is where they don't have enough money in a reserve fund, or don't want to use the money in a reserve fund to pay for something that's typically an unusual expense, not a regular expense. Because if it was a regular expense, it would be covered by the strata maintenance fees. Yeah, special assessments are a potential with a townhouse, just as they are with a condo. And that's definitely a con. And then finally, the fourth con, I would say, are stairs. And as I said, most townhouses are 3 levels, and so you got a lot of stairs. And then if you're 3 levels plus a rooftop deck, and then maybe you have internal stairs down to the parking garage, well, now you have 5 sets of stairs, right? Or is that right? No, 4 sets of stairs, but a lot of stairs. And some people don't want to have stairs. And I find especially, downsizers, people that are selling a house as they age, most people like that would typically like to move into a place that doesn't have any stairs. And so they're more likely to buy a single level condo. Usually families don't mind. And to be honest, sometimes families kind of prefer that separation, right? Like to have the master bedroom suite at the very top level and have the teenagers on the level below. So there's a little bit more separation than having your bedrooms next to one another. But typically, stairs can be viewed as a bit of a con. Hey, if you're getting any kind of value out of this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that thumbs up button. It'll help more people just like you find this video. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more of me. I do put out videos about living in Vancouver and moving to Vancouver every single week. Now let's get back to the video. I'm going to talk real quick about where you can find townhouses in Metro Vancouver. We're going to start with the city of Vancouver. The reason that I'm bringing up where you can find them is because they're actually not built everywhere. There is sort of a period of construction in the 70s, and then there's very centralized areas where they were building townhouses from the 80s into the 2000s, and it's only in the last 10 years or so that they've kind of spread out through other parts of the city and other parts of Metro Vancouver more than originally happened. And the main reason for this is that we are trying to fill that missing middle portion and provide homes that are relatively affordable for families. And there's more of an appetite for that kind of solution amongst single-family residential, pockets of the city. In Vancouver, probably one of the areas that you're going to find the greatest concentration is in the Fairview Slopes, just to the south of downtown. Mount Pleasant is another big center, and really, so we're kind of just crossing. We're going from west further east here, from Fairview over to Mount Pleasant, and then over a little bit further east to Commercial Drive. So that kind of band, you're going to find quite a few. You're going to find it in a lot of the other communities in those areas, but I'd say those are the three areas kind of closest to downtown where you're going to find the greatest centralization of townhouses. Outside of downtown, an area that I think there's actually quite good value is Champlain Heights. They're typically older and they're quite often leasehold. If you're budget conscious and you'd like to stay in Vancouver, that's an area that I'd really focus on. And then outside of Vancouver in the suburbs, many of the suburbs have more townhouses that you're going to find in the city of Vancouver. For instance, Port Moody has a ton. It's a very small suburb. The Tri-Cities in general, I would say Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam, but there's specific areas of Coquitlam. So Burke Mountain is an area where basically it's all townhouses and all young families. I remember, in my going out there the first time, say 10 years ago, I suddenly realized where all the young families in Vancouver were going, and it was Burke Mountain, because that's everybody was, 25 to 35 and had 2 to 3 kids. Something that I wasn't used to seeing in the city of Vancouver where I was living. And in New West, that's another area you're going to see a lot, and in particular Queensborough. And again, if you're looking the more affordable pocket, I would really say is Queensborough. And part of the reason that it's more affordable is because it's not in that contiguous portion of New West where you don't have to cross the bridge. Queensborough is on an island, essentially. You have to cross a bridge in order to get to Queensborough. And because of that, it's a little less convenient. You're impacted a little more by rush hour traffic. But it's a very nice townhouse community. Lastly, I would mention once again, Surrey. South Surrey, I've seen massive amounts of townhouse developments out there. And again, when we're talking about the prices, as we now know, Surrey is really where you're going to see the greatest affordability and the lowest price point. And the lowest price points, I should say, close to the city of Vancouver. The prices will start getting lower the further out you go, but Surrey I'm using as the example, sort of as the first step over a bridge where prices come down. And frankly, South Surrey White Rock is absolutely gorgeous. It's a fantastic community. If you don't mind a bit longer commute, another really nice family community out in South Surrey. You know what? I'm always looking for new video ideas. I'm always thinking about them, but I thought, who better to ask than you, the viewer? You want information about Vancouver, and I want to give it to you. So comment down below and let me know if there's some ideas that you have about content ideas, specifically, things that you just have questions of, or you're struggling to find information on. Maybe there's no other videos on those topics, or maybe you just want to hear my take on them. So comment down below and let me know what you want to see. And let's see if I can create some videos for you. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that you want to watch out for when you're buying a townhouse. I myself lived in a townhouse once upon a time. It was sort of my in-between step in between going from a condo to a house, that missing middle once again. So I do have experience here. And of course, I help plenty of people move into townhouses. But the big one is you want to watch out for a leaky condo. And so it's not just your own standalone house. It's similar to an actual condo, an apartment building split into many owners, but it's a townhouse. So it's a stratified townhouse. You own this asset with all of the other owners. And so that asset could potentially be your biggest liability if there's some serious issue. And the biggest potential for an issue in our market tends to be if it's a leaky condo, if it needs to be rain screened. And especially some townhouse developments, the bills for this kind of work can be enormous. I've seen owners hit, with $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 special assessments in some areas because their townhouse development has to be rain screened. So that's definitely something you want to be looking out for. And you want to be working with a realtor who can guide you through this process and help you find a good quality product, not get stuck with those massive bills. And incidentally, I am a real estate agent. You can reach out to me anytime if you'd like to work together or get that ball rolling. Number two, maintenance fees. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a big difference in those standalone townhouse developments versus the ones that are attached to much larger stratas, typically large condo towers. It's part of your monthly expense. It's not just going to be your mortgage. You have to pay the taxes, and you also have to pay the maintenance fees. And so it's a big hit on your budget or a big difference in your budget, a $200 maintenance fee versus a $1,200 maintenance fee, obviously. So something to watch for. Pay attention to those maintenance fees. And number three, strata documents. You're going to get a whole slew of documents when you make an offer or after you make an offer, and you want to review those carefully, you and your real estate agent, and make sure you understand what you're getting into. If you don't understand anything in those documents, talk to your real estate agent and get them to help you understand or find the answers for you. But there's a lot of detail in there. And one of the most important documents that you're going to come across is something called a depreciation report. I'm not going to get into the details of it here, but just pay close attention to that. Understand it and talk to your real estate agent about it in depth. Fourth thing is an inspection. Hire a professional inspector. Don't try and do it yourself. It's a third party that has no vested interest and a licensed expert in the field who can give you an expert opinion on what you're buying, what to look out for. And if nothing else, they're also going to help you understand how to maintain it and how to look after it. So inspections, I think, are really important. And so if you are looking for a townhouse, just be aware of a couple things. One is that there's a very limited supply of townhouses. They're not as plentiful, not as many options as there are for houses, and definitely not as plentiful as condos. They're a little more challenging to find and to fit within your budget in the exact spot that you want to be. But number two is that they're actually becoming much more common. And starting in November in the city of Vancouver, as an example, townhouses are essentially going to be able to be built on every single property. All single-family residential will allow a minimum of 3, could be 4, up to 6 separate units. And how these are going to be structured, are they going to be 2 larger units and 4 much smaller ones? Are they all going to be equal size? That's yet to be determined. The real details of the legislation. Essentially, all municipalities are kind of moving slowly to realize that this kind of home is what all of our cities are really missing and what people are really demanding. And if we want young families to stay close to the city, we need to be able to provide this for them. So look out. They're hard to find for the most part at the moment, but we should be seeing much more of them coming onto the market in the next year to 2 years. And finally, the only other thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned when you're thinking of buying a townhouse is I would consider buying half duplex as well. There can be a lot of similarities between the two. And if there's some of the cons that you don't really love about a townhouse, like the high maintenance fees or potential for maintenance fees and the potential for special assessment, like the rules in particular, that I would say. And if you really want a garage and if you really want outdoor space, a half duplex might be a good solution for you. And what that is one house that's split into 2 owners. You will always have a garage and you will always have outdoor space. So that's just a quick tip as something that I'd be considering if I'm looking at a townhouse, and they're not necessarily considerably more money. So there you have it. There's your guide to finding a townhouse in Metro Vancouver. I hope you found that useful. I really appreciate you watching and sticking all the way to the end. Hit that like button if you got any kind of value out of this video, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of me. I put out videos like this every single week about living in Vancouver and moving to Metro Vancouver. Of course, I am a real estate agent as well, and I'd be remiss in not asking you to reach out if you're thinking of moving here. I'd be happy to help you. It all begins with a conversation. So my contact information is right there on the screen. Reach out anytime and we can get that ball rolling. And in the meantime, here's a couple other videos that I think you're going to like. There's one over here that I think is pretty good. And this is my last video that I think you're also going to like. So thank you again. We'll see you next week.